Welcome to this episode of Variations, where we offer inspiration based on word and music and images. Today, we're still talking about sin. What can we say about sin? Why is it important to talk about? What difference does it make? How can we name them? We're covering a lot of that. I'm glad you're watching.
Sin, 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 sin. Sin, 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 sin. Sin, 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 sin. Sin, 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 sin. Sin, 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 sin. Sin, 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 sin. 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. What's a sin? What is a sin? What's a sin? Some say 7 is a lucky number. 777. Some say there are 7 deadly sins. But again, wait, what's a sin? An immoral act, a type of transgression, often regrettable. Let's dive into today's lesson. Truth is from the inside out. Thank you, Lauren. Let's say that again. Truth is from the inside out. El Boogie. And if we're created in their image, then the divine is within. Sin universal, right from wrong. Sin is seen as a state in which we are separated from God. Seems odd, yet when in line with the divine, most often decisions are made with the well-being of others in mind. Yet sometimes, decisions made in haste, selfishness, and lack of love lead us in a particular way. Heavy hearts, uncertainty in our understanding, led away, we stray. Through confession to self, to others, to the divine, forgiveness is on its way. Man, woman, they, them, and one another do not forgive sin, but the divine within, again, is where we turn for forgiveness of sin. Sin, 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 sin. Sin, 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 sin. Sin, 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 sin. Sin, sin, sin. That's what you do with such frequency. The gram, the glam, prideful sham. Not to judge, but quite absurd. The filter to mask the hurt, the pain, the shame. This game is played. Necessary ills, excuses in excess, bills, chill. American dreams, choose your team or get cut quick. Sickening what's seen, such greed, no need, just seething for more and more and more. The sins of the flesh, bodies as commodities, there to be conquered. Feeling blue, are you? Oh, please, look at these. The he's, the she's, the thems. A soft sin? I'm only human, of flesh and blood, born to make mistakes. Ooh, that looks great. The grass seems greener. He buys more paint, builds a wall to stand tall or long. Sing songs to outshine neighbors, a braggart it seems by nature, plotting, scheming to outdo others, incessantly obsessed with that of your sisters and brothers. Classmates, blackout drunk, weekends, week in and week out, draining daddy's bank account, wasted on food, drink, and more. Sober Saturdays, short-lived, sleep in, they thin gin, they feed face, they get up, they get out, and they do it again, and 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 low love from father, a shallow seething anger, a danger to self and others, slow to self-love, despised by others, business partners, former lovers, oft accused of toxicity, belittling behaviors, the mockery. Time's a wasting, the mind and time, both terrible things to waste. No, not haste, but wait, for there's work to be done. Rest, yes, but when the time comes, get up, get to it. Each of us can do it. Do something. Jeez.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale. You might have to be a certain age to know where that jingle comes from. It was the theme song to Gilligan's Island, a story about a group on a tour boat getting stranded on a deserted island with nothing but their sins. Okay, well, that's not in the theme song, but each of the characters represented one of the traditional deadly sins, according to the creator of the show, Sherwood Schwartz. Gilligan represented sloth, the skipper, wrath, the professor, pride, Marianne was envy, Ginger, lust, Mr. Howell was greed, and Mrs. Howell was gluttony, with her multitude of suitcases for just one 3-hour tour. Schwartz said he was searching for a way to portray 7 very different people who are stuck with one another and have to get along. The list of 7 deadly sins starts off with pride, defined as taking credit for something when the credit really belongs to God, or at least something bigger than yourself. Occasionally, you'll see an athlete bow down in prayer after a touchdown as the player gives gratitude to God for giving him his ability. Greed, that's on the list. I find greed is much easier to pin on those who are just above us on the economic ladder, rather than recognizing what is enough in our own lives. Same thing with gluttony. Envy, that's insidious. It's hard to see why it's a sin. It just seems to be built into who we are. Traditionally, envy was defined as misery at a neighbor's prosperity, which is why one theologian replaced envy with sadness. Envy can also be delight when a neighbor is just as miserable as we are. Anger, that's a sin when it reaches the point of murder or wounding another person or even one's self. In medieval art, this vice was depicted in scenes of fighting or suicide. It seems like everyone is desperate and angry these days. Lust is an inordinate enjoyment of sexual pleasure and sex outside the procreative and unitive purposes. That's a whole sermon in itself, one in which I preach. You can find that on our YouTube channel. It would seem as if our culture has freed itself from the church's restrictions on sex, but that doesn't mean we have a healthy understanding of it. Sloth? I think of those cute little creatures from Central and South America that are having a moment right now. And sloth is simply being lazy. But sloth, for the early theologians, was a lack of care for performing spiritual duties. One theologian replaced sloth with sadness, because when a person becomes sluggish in their spiritual exercises, the body becomes weary. Amid all the evidence of these characters in our lives, we haven't done much to figure out what to do about them. We, like the castaways on Gilligan's Island, just learn to live with them, and we might even get to like them after a while. But they're called sins for a reason. And it's not so much about the 7 or the various ways we act out each of these sins. It's not so much even about the lawfulness of avoiding this kind of behavior. It's more about what these attitudes do to us and our relationships with ourselves, with one another, and with God. This list, the 7 deadly sins, it originated from a Christian monk who spent all of his life working on his relationships with God and his fellow brothers in the monastery. And he named these 7 thoughts as things that could get in the way of our relationships. It wasn't only until later that they became sins. It was just thoughts. And when we think about it, these 7 things really can get in our way. They can ruin our relationships, and they can really cause what that monk thought, the death of the soul. How did that theme song end? The boat was tossed, the ship was lost. If not for the courage of the fearless crew, the minnow would be lost. It takes courage to look at ourselves that deeply and see the things that we need to change about ourselves. But what we lose if we don't, we don't want to lose that. It's something to think about. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Variations. I hope I have given you some food for thought as you try and expand the notion of what 7 deadly sins mean. And if you've enjoyed my words and Kenton's poetry and Jabon's beautiful music, I hope you will hit that like button, share this with a friend, and make sure you subscribe. And I really do want to know your thoughts. So write a comment in the section below. I will read them and get back to you. In the meantime, I'll see you next week.